At my wife's funeral, I stood beside the coffin, holding her favorite silver cross, when I heard my daughter's fiancé, Marcus, lean toward her and whisper, "Feels like a celebration." His bright crimson suit stood out like a warning flare in the sea of black. My daughter, Claire, let out a soft laugh, as if they were already counting what they believed would soon be theirs. When the lawyer later invited us to hear the reading of the will, Marcus's swagger turned into fury. He shot up from his chair, his voice sharp with outrage, and stormed out of the office, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. The rain that day fell in relentless sheets, drumming against the forest of black umbrellas swaying over my wife's grave. I stayed at the edge of the open earth, clutching Eleanor's cross until the worn edges bit into my palm. The air carried the smell of wet soil and the sharp sting of loss. Among the muted tones of mourning, Marcus's bright red suit cut through the crowd like a deliberate insult. He walked with an easy confidence, his polished shoes clicking against the cobblestones. He leaned to Claire again, his lips close to her ear. "This day is like a holiday," he murmured loudly enough that the nearest guests stiffened. Claire's quick laugh cut deeper than the cold wind. I didn't react, only tightened my grip on the cross, letting the cool metal anchor me as the priest's words blurred into the rhythm of the rain. Eleanor was gone, and they were already treating her memory as something to carve up and spend. Marcus's suit caught the dim light as he tilted his head back, smiling in a way that didn't belong here, in the place where I had last promised Eleanor I would hold the family together. A friend of Eleanor's brushed my arm and whispered condolences, but my throat was too tight to answer. The service drew to a close, and guests began to drift away beneath the wind-tossed umbrellas. Marcus and Claire lingered near the path, his red suit a deliberate challenge. When he met my gaze, his smirk deepened, as if I no longer mattered. I kept my silence. My dignity was all I had left. By the time the cemetery was empty and the rain had faded to a mist, Marcus and Claire were gone, no doubt discussing what they imagined was already theirs. I traced the grooves of the cross with my thumb, a map of Eleanor's faith and devotion, and slid it into my pocket. They thought I was too old and too broken to fight. They were wrong. Back home, the rain tapped against my windows while I sat in the dim light of a single street lamp outside. On the table, a faded photograph showed Eleanor holding a young Claire's hand, both smiling wide. Now my daughter could barely meet my eyes. The house still smelled faintly of Eleanor's lavender perfume. I had sacrificed decades for Claire, working 2 jobs, selling our family home to pay for her wedding to Marcus, believing it was for her happiness. Eleanor had warned me once, "Marcus will take everything if you let him." I hadn't listened. Over the years, Claire grew distant, her visits rare. Marcus, meanwhile, made subtle jabs about my quaint house and small life. That evening, I found Eleanor's old leather-bound notebook on the bookshelf. Inside, in her careful handwriting, was a single word: justice. My pulse quickened. Eleanor had known what might happen. She'd left me a path. I felt a resolve settle in my chest. The next day, the mist still clung to Portland streets as I sat in my kitchen, Eleanor's notebook open in front of me. Her single word, justice, seemed to watch me from the page. I could almost hear her voice. "Don't let them take everything." I called Lisa Carter, an old friend of Eleanor's and a lawyer I trusted. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the steel beneath it when I told her about Marcus's smugness at the funeral. "Eleanor knew they might try something," Lisa said. "She planned for it." She suggested we meet at her office that afternoon. Lisa's building was a modest brick structure downtown. The hallway smelled faintly of paper and jasmine. She greeted me with a warm but serious smile, guiding me to a chair across from her desk. I told her everything: Marcus's red suit, Claire's laughter, their greedy whispers. Lisa listened without interruption, her fingers tapping lightly on a folder before her. "Eleanor's will leaves the majority of her estate to a charity in her name," she explained. It's airtight. But if you want to make sure Marcus and Claire never get the upper hand, we can do more." Her eyes had a spark that matched the one building inside me. I leaned forward. "What do you have in mind?" She outlined a plan. Transferring certain assets immediately, creating a trail that would frustrate any legal challenge. But I wanted leverage. Something personal. "We could hire a private investigator," Lisa offered, already jotting down a name. "Marcus strikes me as careless. People like him leave evidence behind." That evening, I called the investigator, a man known only as Crow. His voice was low, unhurried. I asked him to dig into Marcus's finances and habits, and he agreed without hesitation. 2 days later, he called back with his first find, an offshore account Marcus had kept secret from Claire, where he was funneling money from their shared funds. It was the perfect crack in their facade. Eleanor had been right. Greed makes people reckless. I wrote the words "hidden account" in her notebook, underlining them twice. 1 week later, I visited Marcus and Claire's mansion under the pretense of checking in. Their home was all glass, marble, and ostentation, but I noticed unpaid bills half hidden on a side table. Marcus tried to maintain his usual arrogance, offering coffee while Claire hovered, quieter than usual. As I sat there, I played the part of the tired, harmless widower. But I was noting everything: the tension in Claire's voice, the way Marcus's eyes flicked to the pile of envelopes, the faint smell of spilled wine lingering under the heavy perfume. Before I left, Marcus assured me they had big plans and deals in the works. I smiled, pretending to believe him. Back home, I wrote in Eleanor's notebook: debts, arrogance, Claire uncertain. The shape of the plan was now clear in my mind. The hidden account would be my first move. The following morning, I prepared a plain white envelope filled with bank statements from Marcus's secret account. It was addressed anonymously to Claire. I imagined her face when she read it. The shock, the anger, the fracture it would create between them. When the envelope slid into the mailbox, I felt the first real sense of control since Eleanor's death. By the end of that week, I parked my sedan a short distance from a high-end restaurant downtown. Through its tall glass windows, I could see Marcus and Claire seated at a long table with friends. Marcus was in a deep green suit, holding court with loud stories, while Claire sipped her wine with a guarded smile. I had already sent the envelope earlier that day. It was addressed to Claire and contained every detail of Marcus's secret account. All I had to do now was wait. From my place on the sidewalk, I saw the moment it happened. Claire glanced at her phone, her face going pale. She leaned toward Marcus, speaking quickly. He froze, then his jaw tightened. A moment later, he slammed his glass down hard enough to turn every head in the restaurant. "You've been stealing from me?" Claire's voice cut through the low hum of conversation. Marcus shot back something I couldn't hear, but the sharpness in his tone carried even through the glass. Guests began to lean away, some whispering, others openly watching. Claire stood, pointing at him. "You think I wouldn't find out? You've ruined everything." Her words struck like stones. Marcus stood too, his face dark with rage, firing back accusations. The tension in the room was electric, the kind that makes everyone else want to disappear. I didn't need to see more. I turned and walked toward my car, knowing the wedge had been driven deep. Later that night, my phone rang. Marcus's name lit the screen. I answered, and his voice came through low and venomous. "You're behind this, aren't you? You think you're clever. You'll regret it." I let him spit his threats until his voice cracked. Then I said only, "Good night, Marcus," and ended the call. 2 days later, there was a sharp knock at my door. When I opened it, Marcus and Claire stood on my porch, dripping from the rain. Marcus pushed past me without asking, his shoulders rigid with fury. Claire followed, quieter but visibly shaken. "You've been meddling," Marcus said, his voice like gravel. "Now the creditors are circling, and it's your fault." I raised an eyebrow. I'm just an old man, Marcus. What could I possibly do to you? Claire broke in, her tone softer but edged with desperation. We just need help, Dad. Please, alone, just until we get back on our feet. I leaned against the counter, Eleanor's notebook in my hands. Sell the mansion, I said evenly. Live within your means. Marcus's eyes flashed. That house is our life. We're not giving it up. I shrugged. Then you've made your choice. Marcus stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Claire lingered for a moment, her eyes glassy. I'm sorry, she whispered before following him into the rain. I closed the door and set the notebook on the table, its pages filling quickly with notes and dates. The cracks were now wide open. It was time to move on to the final part of the plan. The day of the will reading, the lawyer's downtown office felt heavy with tension. Thick clouds pressed against the windows, and the air smelled faintly of polished wood and paper. I sat across from Marcus and Claire, Eleanor's silver cross in my pocket. Lisa Carter stood at the head of the table, a thick folder before her. Marcus lounged in his chair with false ease, tapping his fingers, while Claire kept her eyes down. Lisa's voice was calm but deliberate as she began. According to Eleanor's wishes, the bulk of her estate, including savings, properties, and investments, will fund the Eleanor White Children's Foundation. Marcus froze mid-tap. What? His voice was sharp, almost a bark. Lisa continued without flinching. The foundation will support pediatric care across Oregon. It is fully endowed. Claire's head jerked up, eyes wide. That's everything. To Marcus Green, Lisa went on. Eleanor leaves her antique pocket watch. To Claire White, a collection of first-edition books. The chair scraped violently against the floor as Marcus shot to his feet. This is a joke. She can't do this. His face was flushed, his voice rising with every word. You set this up. He jabbed a finger toward me, his anger shaking the air. I met his glare steadily. Eleanor saw you clearly, Marcus, both of you. Claire's face was pale, her lips pressed tight. Marcus slammed his hands on the table, sending a stack of papers sliding to the floor. This isn't over, he growled, then stormed out. The door slamming so hard it echoed down the hall. The room fell silent except for the faint rustle of the papers Lisa calmly gathered. Claire sat frozen for a moment before whispering, Dad, I cut her off. Eleanor spoke for me today. Lisa closed the folder and nodded. We're finished here. I stood, the cross in my pocket warm from my hand, and walked out into the cool air. A break in the clouds let sunlight fall across the street. I felt the weight of months lift just slightly. Justice had finally spoken. The next morning, the cemetery was quiet under the soft light of May. Sun filtered through the oak branches, scattering shadows across Eleanor's grave. I knelt, tracing her name on the cool stone. The silver cross hung from my hand, catching the light. You did it, I said quietly. You saw them for what they were, and you made it right. I sat for a moment on the damp grass, letting the breeze carry the scent of blooming lilacs. In my mind, I could still hear Marcus's furious voice in the lawyer's office, the door slamming, and Claire's silence. They had thought they could take everything. Instead, Eleanor had left them nothing but the weight of their own greed. Rising, I brushed the dirt from my knees and slipped the cross into my pocket. The man who stood here months ago, broken and uncertain, was gone. Later, I walked into the same cafe where Lisa and I had first spoken after the funeral. She was already seated, a notebook open in front of her, a small smile tugging at her lips. You look lighter, she said, sliding a mug toward me. Feels like I've shed something heavy, I replied. She chuckled. Marcus and Claire are selling the mansion. Word is they're drowning in debt. Eleanor would have enjoyed knowing that. We talked about the foundation, about new projects and ideas. She asked if I wanted to be more involved. I said maybe, but first, a trip. Somewhere quiet. somewhere I could think about what comes next. When we parted, the afternoon sun was warm on my face. I slipped Eleanor's notebook into my jacket. Its pages, once filled with grief and plans for justice, were now ready for something new. The horizon seemed wide and open, waiting.